daisies. What is up, YouTube? I'm Red02 and welcome back for part 2 of the lifted vtwin turbo diesel mud mower build. This is my Wheelhorse B80. If you haven't already, go check out part 1 of this. It gives you a little bit more in depth of where I got this vtwin diesel at and what my plans are for this video. Now, the last video we left off with a little bit of a cliffhanger. I was going to start this engine for you guys, but I did not get it running for you in the last video. We had a little bit of a starter issue, but stick around for later in the video. We'll get this thing running for you. But as you can see, it's in the tractor, so let's go over a little bit of what we ran into with issue-wise for this thing. So as you can see, this thing is massive. I went ahead and removed the big old fuel tank. We're not using that. I moved the homemade engine plate that this thing was bolted up to the exhaust, and I went ahead and removed the air cleaner assembly because we're going to be putting a snorkel on this thing. Plus, later on with the turbocharger, we're going to have to build a custom intake anyways. Now, this engine is a lot bigger than your normal V-twin. A Briggs & Stratton Vanguard V-twin is, the block ends about here, but because the diesel has to have an injection pump, the block is about 3 inches wider than what a Vanguard would be, which that poses a lot of issues here. Is the crankshaft is over here, and right back there is the belt that is in line with the transaxle pulley. So somehow I have to get this crankshaft connected to that belt back there. Another issue is I really don't like cutting hoods at all if I can get away from it. You can see that this does not shut all the way. I will have to trim out the hood a big portion to get this to come down over top of the intake and all of this stuff over here. Now, I did remove my custom fuel tank that was in here. It was actually, the engine had to be, the injection line was all the way out here. It was hitting the fuel tank in this dash piece, and it actually, the grill hit the oil cooler here on the side of the engine even worse. So I would have had to cut even more of the hood. And then another issue is with steering. We only have about 3 inches in between the tire and the engine. So we got the 20 horsepower Punsen V-twin 20 horsepower diesel, and we have a 10 horsepower Sterling Yanmar clone. This is going to be a double cold start. It's going to be a pony start and an old start because neither of these engines have ran for a while. It's like 30 degrees outside, so we're going to start up to 10 horse. Obviously I've been having the issues with the starter, so we're going to pony start this V-twin so you guys can hear it, and then we're going to tear off the engine plate and start throwing it into the Wheelhorse. This thing hops around too much, and I guess the engine pulley on the positive terminal here was sparking up pretty good, but it runs. So we're going to take off this big nasty plate off the bottom here, and we're going to start working its way into the Sears killer. So if you guys haven't already seen any of my other videos, this is my mud Dynamark. It's a Dynamark chassis. It's got a built 20 horsepower Vanguard vtwin in it. It's probably pushing about 40 horsepower. I got videos of this on my channel. If you like off-road mud mower stuff, go check out all my other videos if you want. So ladies and gents, we have 3 major issues with slapping this big old V-twin in this tiny wheel horse B80. The number 1 issue is the crankshaft. It will not align with the transaxle in any way, shape, or form. So we have to figure out how to connect the crankshaft to the transaxle. I cannot move this engine over anymore, as our issue number 2 is the distance between the tire and the engine. I'm not going to be able to turn this thing very sharp the way it is. That's as far as I can turn this to the left. And number 3 is how much of the hood are we willing to chop off to fit this engine. So with the steering, I'm going to be kicking this front axle out to make it even with the rear tires back here, and I will be making it a swept front axle as well to help with steering. So we can kind of eliminate that issue. We already have a solution for that one. Now, with connecting the crankshaft back to the transaxle and with cutting the hood, I just don't think it's going to work out. So I take back fully what I said. I forget what his name is, but he commented on my first video. He suggested that I swap this engine at 90 degrees like a cub orientation would be, and just the idea of that made me sick. I wanted to try and keep it as original setup as possible, but the more I think about it, that 90-degree setup is probably going to work out a little bit better. So we'll swap this engine and turn it 90 degrees, and we'll see what it looks like. So right off the bat, with this engine cocked 90 degrees, we already pretty much solved 2 of my issues with how much the hood needs to be trimmed. If I swap this engine in this position, I only have to notch out a very slight bit on both sides of the hood to clear the valve covers. And number 2, I am widening this front axle, so with just swapping the engine 90 degrees, I get even more steering angle already right off the bat. So with this front axle being wider, I will get even more steering angle. So both of those are pretty much solid answers to my issues. Now the third issue is how am I going to connect this back to the transaxle, being that the transaxle is parallel with the frame, and then now this engine is perpendicular. It's 90 degrees to the input of the transaxle. So I got a couple ideas. Let's dig into those and see what we come up with. Here's a little bit of a close-up of how this engine's sitting in here 90 degrees. The same gentleman that suggested putting this engine in this orientation, he also, suggested running a right angle gearbox at the back of the tractor. So now if I go ahead and run a right angle gearbox at the back of the tractor, I have to figure out how to connect the crank to the right angle gearbox. We have a steering shaft directly in front of the output of the crank. I do not want to move this engine left or right any, because with it sitting exactly where it is, it means all the weight is completely centralized in the frame, and we won't have to worry about the tractor tipping to one side more than the other if I was to move this engine from side to side. So I either have to build a drive shaft. We'll put a U-joint on the output and run a drive shaft around the steering shaft. But I run into an issue running the drive shaft through the tunnel back here, because these wheel horse tunnels are super skinny, as if I had to run a drive shaft through here, it'd be hitting the shifter. So that kind of scratches that idea. We cannot run a drive shaft through the center tunnel of the tractor. But what we can do is there's a ton of room right here next to the footboard, is I can run a we can connect the engine to the jack shaft and run a jack shaft back through here and make a nice aluminum or stainless steel cover. And then we can put the gearbox back here somewhere. We have more than enough room for a right angle gearbox, and then we just need to figure out how to attach it to the transaxle. Well guys, thank you for watching. Unfortunately, this was another big old information dump video, but at least you got to hear this beast run before I tore it apart to put it in the tractor. I just got back from vacation, so I wasn't able to really do any much fabrication or anything on this. And plus, with the whole starter issue, I'm having a real hard time finding a replacement gear or even a starter, as in this being a Chinese engine company, and I can't find parts anywhere. And then now we're into the whole bunch of driveline issues. I did source a cast iron right angle gearbox. I'm awaiting on that being shipped. So I can't really do much right now. So in part 3, we're gonna go ahead and start working on the custom front rock rings for the front wheels to match these rear bead locks that I built. And then we'll go ahead and start making that custom front axle for you guys in part 3 as well. So at least on the next video, we'll start doing some actual fabrication and get this thing on the roll now that I'm back from vacation. But in the meantime, until part 3 comes out, if you'd like, go check out my other off-road mower videos. I got a ton of content on that. The whole entire Top Tractor Challenge series is on my channel. That's my event that I host. So go check out those videos in the meantime. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you stick around for part 3 and the rest of this series. Have a wonderful day. We'll catch you on the next one.